everybody. Welcome to my presentation entitled A Comprehensive Overview of Critical Race Theory, better known as CRT. Let's go ahead and hop in. So, what is critical race theory, you may ask? Well, critical race theory is essentially storytelling. It's a study of how racism is ingrained in society, or systemic, if you will, assessing disparities between racial groups across institutions. It argues that racial perspectives are the result of larger structural racism. Allow me to give you guys some historical background. CRT was introduced in 1970 by Derek Bell in his seminal work, Race, Racism, and American Law. It traces the foundation of systemic racism all the way back to slavery. Now, this is important because there was a time period where African settlers and white settlers actually coexisted and worked together to meet economic needs. It wasn't until there was an economic advantage seen from enslaving African settlers in which the institution we know today as slavery was established, and thus the white identity with it. From that, the social construct of race and racial hierarchy came to be. So let's move on. So oftentimes, systemic racism is enforced by law. So I have a quote here that says the law is often the handmaiden of society in which it operates. Let's talk about some key tenets of critical race theory. So some key tenets of critical race theory include, but are not limited to, racial realism, skepticism, and interest convergence. So racial realism is the idea that racism is a permanent fixture in society. Skepticism is the idea that kind of evolves from racial realism, and it's the idea that it becomes evident that systemic racism cannot be abolished or erased from society because it is so permanently ingrained in society. And then another key tenet to pay attention to with critical race theory is interest convergence. It was originally discussed by Derek Bell, and it is the idea that racial progress is driven by white interests. So it is the idea that when there are wants and needs for racial progress, that progress is only seen generally when it converges with white interests. And so we'll kind of circle back to this in the next slide. So interest convergence in action. A commonly referenced example of interest convergence at work is Brown versus Board. We all know this case. We all know the decision and how it has impacted society. That being said, the decision from this case is not one that was just coincidental, surprisingly, probably to most of you guys. That being said, the decision from this case actually came about because it had that interest convergence. So that agenda with that case converged with white political agenda at the time. And that is what helped the court to rule in the favor of that case. So this was originally cited in Derek Bell's work and then later confirmed by Mary Dudziak in her work, Cold War Civil Rights. All right, let's go ahead and move on. Some applications of critical race theory are that language is a reinforcement. So I have a quote here that says one of the most pervasive ways in which racial ideas are conveyed and reinforced is through language. And then also literature and media. So it's no secret that literature and media are often arbitrary and marginalize non-white voices. So let's go on here. Some criticisms of critical race theory are attribution of racial progression to white agenda. So basically, there are critics who feel as though critical race theory almost attributes racial progression to white power and what white agenda allows. So kind of putting the power in the hands of the oppressor. And then threat to the racial hierarchy slash white supremacy. So, for lack of a better way of putting it, there are definitely critics, especially in these times, who feel as though critical race theory kind of shines a light on that racial hierarchy and white supremacy and in a negative way. And so they do not favor critical race theory because of that. Okay, so let's move on. In conclusion, critical race theory explores and highlights racial imbalance in society and is a form of counter storytelling that encourages marginalized groups to analyze institutions and strategize systemic change. Um, I have a quote here that says, our system of race is like a two-headed hydra. One head consists of outright racism, the other head consists of white privilege, a system in which whites help buoy each other up. This quote came from Richard Delgado, another great visionary in the growth of this theory, in his original works, Critical Race Theory and Introduction. So that's all I have right now. Thank you guys for listening to my presentation, and please let me know what you think in the comments below.